everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Stephanie Silverman, one of the owners of Your Teen. We want to thank our sponsor, Virtual Driver Interactive. We'll be talking more about them a little bit later in the program. Great company, and also, like Your Teen, really trying to enforce safety and create some experiences, which you'll hear more about. Virtual Driving Essentials, one of their products, and create some simulations for our kids that we wouldn't dare create on the road, but try and give them some experiences. So I will turn it back to Sue, and we'll hear from our panelists.
Hi, I'm Sue Borison from Your Teen, and I'm sick, so I'm just putting it out there. There might be some hacking. I'm going to try to mute it when I do it. But I was telling someone today, and they said, "Oh, just own it. Everyone's parents, and they understand." So I apologize for that. I wanted to just give you a jarring statistic. Motor vehicle fatality is the leading cause of accident death among teenagers, representing 1/3 of all deaths to teenagers. So yay for all of us for being here. We are joining a cohort of people who are going to make the roads a little safer for everyone. And I have 5 kids. They've all gotten their license. And I have this vivid memory of taking my oldest to the parking lot after she got her permit, and having this feeling like I had just come home from the hospital with a newborn baby, and I was looking around for the grown-ups. And my husband and I looked at each other, we're like, how could they let us leave? We don't know how to not kill this baby. And so I'm in the parking lot with my daughter, and she's literally driving probably 1 mile an hour, and I think we're both gonna die. So I am so grateful to our panelists for being here, because they're gonna help us figure out what our role is in this whole process and how we can raise safe drivers for life. So the format of our evening is that we are going to initially talk about what we do as parents with our teenagers before they even get started, because there's a lot of things that we could be doing before they hit the age that the law says they're old enough to drive. Then after that, we're going to talk about getting behind the wheel, that scary part. Developing mastery and continuing ed will be the next part. So that's like after they get their license, and there's a strong sense of us being done teaching them, we're going to hear otherwise tonight. So I'm going to start with Anne-Marie Hayes. Thank you, Anne-Marie, for being here. We are huge fans at Your Teen of Anne-Marie Hayes. Thank you so much for being here with us.
I'm really happy to be here. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm calling in today from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. About 12 years ago, I had less interest in teens and driving than any of you do. My car was a vehicle to get from one place to the other. I had no interest. And I found out from a friend of mine that my daughter's life expectancy is 13 years less than mine. Now that's wrong, because every generation should live longer. But it was less, and I started to research why, because I only have one daughter who I adore, and I found out that car crashes are the #1 cause of death and injury to teens and young adults. And so I started to get involved. Since then, I've become a driving instructor. I've written a book, and I tour all around Ontario doing road safety events. I also serve on the board of directors for national organizations for youth safety in Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Gary Salvage, Officer Gary Salvage, thank you so much for being here. And we're gonna spotlight you. Did that work? There you go. And we're looking forward to all the advice you're gonna give us tonight.
Thank you very much. I'm proud to be here, glad to be here. I've been an officer for 25 years. I've been an instructor in accidents and defensive tactics, range, and things like that. My deal is what I've been growing on is accidents. I work accidents in 5 different cities, serious injury accidents and fatal crashes. And my thought would be, just so everybody knows, click it or ticket is around Cleveland right now in Ohio, where you want to click it or ticket and make sure you buckle up.
Oh, that's for your safety belt.
That's your safety belt. It's called Click It or Ticket in Ohio. And all around, that's the motto for the month, or a couple weeks right now, where everybody buckles up once you get behind the wheel.
Well, we hope that continues, right? That it's the beginning of a great pattern.
That is.
Andrew Slayer, is with Drive Team, new president of Drive Team, relatively new president of Drive Team. And we are thrilled to have you here as well.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here. We train about 2,500 to 3,000 drivers a year. Of that, about 500 to 800 are teenagers. And so my hope with this is to give parents some tools, some tips, but more importantly, letting them know that there are resources out there for them that they can rely on, that we're here to help. And we want to make sure that these teens and all drivers get home safe each and every night.
Thanks, everybody. So my first question is for Drew. Before they get started, so we're going to cover all the things that we should be doing with our kids prior to them getting their permit. Should we be teaching our kids to drive before they get their permit, and what does that look like?
I think one of the biggest things is that they're already observing us. My kids are young, like we were talking before we started. They're all under 6, but they watch what me and my wife do behind the wheel. And my wife loves when she gets critiqued by our 6-year-old. But they're already watching. So there's things as parents that we can do to get them to observe already. From a time standpoint, they're all different. There's not one that's the same. So we may have some that are eager and ready at 12 and they want to learn these things. And then there's others that are at 17, 18 years old and we're trying to get them involved in driving. But I think some keys are teaching them the right things from the start, as little as opening the owner's manual, start reading, understanding some of the safety systems that are in the vehicle. Going to a parking lot, starting with just basic steering. Where's the gas? Where's the brake pedal? Where's the shifter? How do I start it? We get students that they've never seen a key before. They have push button starts. So understanding some of those basics, I think, is key to get them to develop those skill sets that they need behind the wheel.
Anne-Marie, what would you be talking to kids about before they get their permit, like when they're younger?
Well, I was just going to add to what Drew said. I think he made a really good point there. I think what we call it is talking your drive. And when a teen is getting close to getting to the point where they would get their permit, I think it's a good idea to move them into the passenger seat in the front, making sure they're at least 10 to 11 inches back from the airbag and buckled up, of course, and start talking about what you see on the road. I see the car on the right. It looks like it's going to pull into the parking lot. I think he's going to slow down, and everything that you see ahead of you. And once they get the hang of that, get them to start telling you what they see. It'll help you understand where they're looking and correct where they're looking and make sure that they're observing what's happening around them.
Fantastic. That's such great advice. I did not know that when my kids were at that age, but it seems brilliant. And in fact, our sponsor simulator, Driving Essential XE, the narration is unbelievable. So it's an Xbox tool. Stephanie will talk about it more later, but I had my kid use it and the narration is unbelievable. So even if all you do is hear the narration and model it yourself when you're driving with your kid, it's such a big help. Anne-Marie, how do you know if your teen's, how would someone listening right now know if their teen is ready? And do you encourage people whose kid doesn't seem ready to wait?
Sometimes. I mean, there are some things that I think parents should be looking for. And as I think Drew said, or maybe Gary, every kid is different. So there are different levels of maturity. Some prefer to wait. If they're very nervous, maybe better that they do wait. But for the ones who feel ready, are they responsible? Are they on time? For a kid who's always rushing, that's a really bad habit when you're driving, because rushing means you speed, it means you don't stop at stop signs, it means you run that yellow light. So you want you want to make sure that they're responsible, that if they say they're going to do something, they do something, they do what they say, and that they really do, they don't rush, they're on time, they plan ahead, that they have those kinds of good habits that will help them turn into a good driver.
So it sounds like they have high executive functioning for that age.
Yes.
Yeah.
For considering the age.
Right, for their age. So should we be helping them lay out all the things that they have to do to get their license? I was of the opinion that my kids were about to embark on driving a weapon. And so I didn't get involved at all. I felt like that was a good test for them to see if they could make all their appointments and do everything. But is that reasonable for all kids, Anne Marie?
No. Everybody's different. Yes, I mean, if they're interested in doing it and they can do that, I mean, but make sure you have a hand in it, make sure you watch what they're doing. And that one of the things that I find is a lot of parents don't even know what graduated driver licensing is about. And those kinds of issues, parents need to be involved in. They need to know what the rules are too. So having a hand in it is important.
I think one of the things that we see the most too is that balance between having too much and not enough, which is obviously hard in a lot of things, but having that parent involvement, we see a much better driver at the end of the process than when they're taking it on all on their own and getting those reinforcements at home, because the parents do have to spend the most time with them. We only get so much time as driving instructors. We need those parents involved in understanding as well.
Okay, I just want to defend myself a little bit. I just mentioned the process of signing up and getting their driver's license and signing up for driver's ed, but we did all the hours. So don't you worry, I have safe drivers on the road all over out there. So we talked a little bit about this, but parents are being watched by their kids. What does good behavior look like that we should be clear about? Obviously, we shouldn't be on our phones, but what does that really mean, and what other things should we not be doing? Anne Marie, we'll start with you.
Well, there are a lot of things. I mean, distractions, phones are the big one, and that's the one we talk about all the time. It's not only talking and texting, it's taking YouTube videos. I mean, just Google or look at YouTube for the number of people who are filming or videotaping their first driving lessons. I mean, that's crazy. Eating behind the wheel. Some people say, well, to have a cookie or a bagel, I don't know, but people are eating spaghetti, having full meals behind the driver's wheel. That's crazy. It's all those kinds of things. I mean, we need to model the way that we want our teens to drive, because I guarantee that even if they don't do it when you're in the car with them, they will eventually do it, but with a whole lot less experience than you have.
Anyone have anything to add to that?
I agree with everything that Ann was saying. And I do know that a lot of the kids, even though they're with their parents and driving and watching their behavior, they also look around out their passenger window while they're learning, and they see other people reading the newspaper while driving down the road, shaving their face while driving down the road, putting makeup on while they're driving down the road. The things you can't make up, but they're making observations from not only you as a parent, but they're making observations from what everybody else is doing on the roadway itself also. And I believe, we talked earlier about the training and that. I did with my kids a lot. When they got interested, I started quizzing them when they were in the passenger seat. How do we get here? What road are we on? Where are we headed to? Do you know the path to get there? Just around, as you know, my kids would say, in their bubble, in their area of what they do when they're going to be first starting to drive.
And just to add to that, sorry, that the kids not knowing where they are, where they're going, between GPSs and looking at their phones in the back seat. I mean, my daughter, when she started to drive, we'd be 3 blocks from home and she wouldn't know where she is because she never looked.
Correct.
So I think that it's important to get them involved as early as you can in those kinds of things.
That is an unbelievable point to make. I mean, I see so many people putting makeup on, and it scares me. But that's a moment with your kid to say, that's really, really dangerous. Don't think about doing that. So thank you for all those points. We had a question from Christina, and she's narrating as she's driving with her kid, but her kid keeps saying, I know that. I was going to do that. Keep doing it. So as the kid is driving, she's next to him narrating, and the kid is getting irritated. So what's the response to that? And which one of you would like to answer that?
I would say maybe switch roles at that point. Let the student because it kind of goes back to what Anne Marie was talking about before. Them telling them from the passenger seat, well, now we've built up to they're behind the wheel. Let them tell you what they see. As simple as at an intersection. I'm going to make the right-hand turn after the blue car passes. No, let's wait till the green car passes, whatever the case may be from that perspective. Let them do the narration. I think that may take some of the tension away.
I agree.
I agree.
Wow, I'll agree. Great idea. So, are there universal driving laws, or is it a state by state and everybody just has to really dive into what their state laws are?
Every state has different laws, especially for teenagers. Some can start at 14 with a permit. Some go all the way to 16 with a permit. Some have graduated licensing laws. Some do not. So they're all different. There's a lot of nuances, even when you get into cities and municipalities. I know Gary probably deals with this a lot going from city to city just in Ohio. But we see a lot in the different states that we travel and operate in with some of those differences.
Okay, so that takes me back to a comment that was made before about looking at the owner's manual. There's a whole lot of things you could do before your kid is old enough to drive, like, and probably embarrassingly things that I need to do to know your car. So where do we start with, like, what are the important things for our kids to know about the car that we can do when they're young? Drew, can you answer that one?
Sure. First would just be properly setting the mirrors, knowing the controls, tires, the importance of tires, tire pressure. We suggest even under the hood, understanding why those fluids are important, what the indicator lights mean, and finding those things when it's a small problem versus when I have a major problem going down the road, and they can help with those things while you're behind the wheel.
I think that to add to that, teaching them to circle check a car is a really good idea. And circle checking a car is walking around the car, looking to see if there are any fluids dripping under the car, seeing if there are any dents in the car, and various different things about the maintenance of the car, the tires, cracks, that kind of stuff. But also making sure that when you back out, there's nothing behind you. If you go forward out, there's nothing in front of you. And to just get them into the habit of walking around the car and having a quick look before they get in.
I went even a step a little further with my boys and a few others from around the area that they sent their boys and daughters to me to learn a few things in that. And going forward, I tested them before they even got in the car, how to function everything in the vehicle, whether it's the radio, the directionals, how to change a tire. They had to learn how to change a tire. They had to learn how to check fluids and what fluids, what for wiper fluid. You get stuff on your windshield you can't see. That's going to be a bad day for them. So I went a little further and made them demonstrate how to do it, because owner's manuals get complicated nowadays. When they used to be a couple pages and now they're about this thick, and you're trying to verify what they're talking about. And if you just go through and show them where how the directionals work, do your directionals actually function in the rear? Do the brake lights work? All that way until just putting the different gears they have now. Low gears, high gears, or just drive and not drive, and backup cameras, which is mainly a big thing nowadays on all the new cars, and using a backup camera versus using your mirrors and everything.
Okay, so I think we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but I would also add, I did not know that one of my kids didn't know that the red light meant she was low on gas. And so she was... Yeah, we were driving to another city and she was getting in her highway hours, and all of a sudden there was beeping. And we ran out of gas on the highway. So you might also want to show that to your kids and teach them how to put gas into their car also. Okay, so getting behind the wheel. Anne Marie, is it always the parent who's the best person to do those driving hours that are required?
Definitely not. I mean, often it is the parent. If the parent has good driving skills, has not been too far from having some training, because some people get very lax if they haven't had any training in a long time. But there's also the emotional bond between the parent and the child. And it's really important that when the teen is learning to drive, it's not an emotional area, that it's a focused area, that you're working on driving skills, and it's not, how did you do on that math test while you're driving. So sometimes the parent is not the best person.
That's great to know. Who do we have do it if it's not the parent? How do we navigate that?
Well, the best start is undoubtedly a good driving course. And I'll tell you that they're not all good. I can tell by the way Drew's talking and from my interaction with them in the past that they are a very good driving school. But there are a lot of driving schools that will even ask students to sign for hours they haven't done, that kind of thing. But I don't know in Ohio. I mean, here it's only 10 hours behind the wheel that are included in a standard course. That's not nearly enough. So maybe getting some additional hours with the instructor, or finding somebody who has maybe a family member, maybe a friend who has good driving skills and is calm behind the wheel.
Great advice.
Add to that just a little bit too. If it is the parent and they're getting emotional, it's time to pull over. Maybe we need to take a break at that point and reevaluate. Maybe we switch for a little bit, whatever the case may be, because if they're not paying attention to what they're doing, now nobody's driving, and that's never good. So we want to make sure that we keep those emotions in check. I think that's a huge point.
Really a good point. Okay, so Drew, what I'd like to know from you is the first time you go to the parking lot, what are the first few things you do with your kid before you say, okay, let's drive?
Well, first and foremost is knowing where the brake and the accelerator are. Knowing those, hand position on the steering wheel is key. Where my shifter is, they're in many different places now. So there's a lot of different things that we need to engage there. I think kind of like we talked about before with controls, if it's raining or getting dark or where are the lights, those things. So just some of those basics. But once we put it into gear, some basic right and left hand turns. Put yourself in an open parking lot where there's not many light poles. There's not much around. They can control at a slow speed, and you know that they're able to brake right and left-hand turns. And then I would get into some little bit of backing. And some keys with that are your mirror position. And I'm going to get a little technical for the moment, but there's really 3 different types of mirror position. One for a highway setting, to where you barely see any of the vehicle, if not any of it all, if you're seated properly. One for more of a heavier traffic, where you see about an inch of the vehicle in those side mirrors. And then lastly, for backing, I want to see about an inch of the vehicle and then drop those mirrors down a little bit so that bottom third, you can see the rear wheel wells of the tire. So I can focus on the object that you're going to be backing around. It's a skill set that we see is very limited for a lot of people, but it's a skill set that we need to have, especially with bumpers. They're $1,000 a piece anymore, so we want to make sure that they can back properly, even though it's a small part of what we do as drivers for the most part.
Okay, that's the first time I'm hearing that. So tell me, like when I get on a highway, I'm supposed to adjust the mirrors as I'm driving?
Yes, so they call it the AAA setting, to where if I'm seated properly, so when you're parked, I'm seated properly, you actually lean your head and you're going to adjust the mirror to where you see about an inch of it. So once you're seated back properly, you won't see any of the vehicle at all. And what that does is minimizes your blind spots. So as the vehicle's coming and you see it in the mirror, once that vehicle disappears in the mirror, I do my blind spot check. They're going to be right there. And I do the same thing with the passenger mirror as well.
I think there's a misconception there that we're not actually changing. I don't personally change my mirrors. I keep them out all the time, kind of winged out the way you're talking about. But you would not suggest someone do that while they're driving on the highway.
No, I'm sorry, not while they're driving. If I know that I'm going to be going on the highway, I want to set those when I'm parked first.
Okay. Yeah, there was a comment about that. And yeah, you don't want to ever be adjusting your mirrors while you're moving.
I just want to know from the people who are here, did everyone hear of this before? Oh, you did? Okay, because Wow. I mean, I needed that rule because I often feel on the highway that my mirrors aren't right. Okay, so this question is for Anne Marie. A lesson plan, to develop a lesson plan with your teen. Where would a parent go to kind of put that in place to make sure they're covering all their bases?
Okay, again, the best place to start is with a good driving school. But when parents are giving supplemental practice, what I often hear from parents is, oh, you don't have to worry about us because every time we go to the grocery store, Junior drives. Driving 100 times to the grocery store is not good practice. It has to be, driving is complicated. We have double right turns, double left turns, we have roundabouts, we have highway driving, we have country driving. They're all different. And you need practice, they need practice in each of those different areas. So I would start with quiet city streets, well, parking lots, quiet city streets, move up to busier streets. And then as you advance, you're moving to more trafficked areas and ultimately to highway driving and country driving. Country driving is very different because it's high speed and you have a lot of different distractions like wild animals, other things on the road.
Wow, great. Anybody want to add anything?
No, I agree completely. It's definitely a process. You've got to start slow. And I think one of the biggest things is I think we talked about it a little bit already, they don't see what we see as drivers. They see about this much. So we've got to get their skill sets at a higher level and start broadening out their vision before you start putting them at higher speeds and more advanced skill sets and things that take a little bit more advanced skill before you put them into those situations, because we're setting them up for failure if we don't start with that process.
Another thing to, oh, sorry. No, I
I'm
was just
sorry.
going to say in that area, we should also be including different weather conditions. I hear from parents, oh, we didn't go because it was raining. We'll go again tomorrow. Well, no, they're going to be driving in rain. And it's important to get back in the car in winter because they'll be driving in snow and ice. So all of that has to be included in driving practice because you don't want them to hit a snowstorm the first time when they're alone in the car.
Gary?
I agree 100%. Tunnel vision is a big thing. Kids get tunnel vision where they don't see anything out of their peripheral, and all of a sudden you put them behind the wheel and you start picking up speed, and all they see is this little bit that's right in front of them. But I also believe in multitasking with them a little bit, talking about the driving, making them tell you what they're going to be doing, whether it's raining, snowing, how are they going to handle it a little differently. Eventually they have to be able to multitask. So like setting your mirrors, that's big when they first start driving. But things are going to happen in a car, whether mom left her shades up in the visor or dad left something up in the visor and all of a sudden it falls while they're driving and you forgot to double check. They got to learn that the roadway's still their primary mission. They're behind a vehicle that can do a lot of damage to someone, something, or to themselves. And they got to be leery of what's going on around them at the same time.
So I guess I'm curious how you go, like, is it just all of a sudden there's growth and practice and so this turns into this? Or is there something that happens along the way that builds those skill sets?
Well, I think you're talking there about scanning skills, are you?
Well, I'm just responding to this narrow vision that teens apparently have when they start to drive.
Even adults get tunnel vision. Adults get tunnel vision quite a bit when they're hit with a scenario or they're hit with something. All of a sudden, all they can see is right in front of them. They lose what's out here. And in law enforcement, we're really big on that because you want to keep your head like swiveling a little bit to see what's going on till you're able to break your habit of, I only can see straight ahead and those are the lines and that's what I got to follow. So getting them to be able to see outside on their right and their left when they're looking straight ahead, to see a dog run across the road, a deer run across the road. That tunnel vision, I think it just takes time and practice that they get a little more comfortable, not only in a parking lot, but on the street in a 25 zone or a 35 zone where they start seeing. But parents help with that by, there's a jogger coming down the roadway or on the sidewalk, that they notice the jogger, he's off to the side, not even close to him, but they pick up the jogger. They pick up there's a dog close to the roadway. Do you see it? Things like that are bringing to their attention so they can start building their horizon from way in here, moving it out, expanding it.
Drew, how do you teach it in your program?
It's like Anne Marie said, it's a scanning process, and it's where they're looking. So like Gary said as well, they're building upon that. Naturally, we look down, look right in front of us, so we have to start getting their vision up and then start the process of them looking down the road. So use seconds. Seconds is kind of used across the training world at this point. So, it's 15 seconds down the road, but then I do back. And then we're teaching them to look in their mirrors at that point. And then I scan to my blind spot. So I know what's happening in front of me, behind me, and beside me at all times. But it's a process. It's not something, it takes hours for them to start getting good at that.